So if you dislike being on camera, feel free to turn your camera off or whatever you got to do. But this way, this workshop will be made available through P3 thanks to Catherine Klepper and Alessandra Sperling at P3 Collaboratory. So it'll be on their Canvas page later on. Yeah, so thank you again. Welcome. This is the Humanities Action Lab, Rutgers Faculty Workshop. My name is Kristen Scorsone, and I'm a PhD candidate in American Studies here at Rutgers Newark. My pronouns are they, them. And if you all want to put into the chat, like your name, what department you're in, what you're interested in learning about, or aspects you want to hear about HAL and the Climates of Inequality project, just let us know in the chat. And yeah, I've been working with the Humanities Action Lab on and off for a few years, assisting HAL partners to get their work into HAL exhibits and onto the exhibit websites, as well as managing like social media, among other things. And I would like to also introduce you to my co-presenter. So it's my awesome HAL colleague, Leora Fuller. Leora, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Leora Shearer. I'm the Learning Coalition Facilitator at HAL, and I also am a lecturer at Rutgers University, and I teach a course that I developed with HAL called Mutual Aid Storytelling and Sharing in the American Studies Department. I've also taught in Women and Gender Studies. And yeah, I'm really excited to share a lot of the things we're going to talk about today.
Very cool, very cool. And then we also have the our illustrious co-director and founder, Liz Savenko, who's going to also introduce herself. And before she does that, I just want to also say that Leora and I have some like 2 specific events and projects we kind of want to build with you. So we'll be circulating a sign-up survey document at the end. So stick around for that. But in the meantime, Liz, take it away.
Thank you. And I'm super excited also to have an unexpected guest from our HAL network, Jess Johnson from UMass Amherst, who, this is so awesome. And I was like, this is actually kind of a Newark focused discussion, but I think actually having her here is great because you can really understand what we're talking about when we talk about this coalition. So I'm going to very slowly and awkwardly share my screen. And it takes a minute. Okay. How's that, Kristen? Are you seeing? Okay, awesome. So I'm just going to give a super quick overview to what the Humanities Action Lab is and kind of the spirit of it. And then Kristen and Leora are going to focus on the specific opportunities to connect that are coming up. And we hope this will be the beginning of a long relationship with everybody here. We are a coalition of universities, community organizations, and together with public spaces in 30 or 40 different communities now who all work together on different projects that dig into local histories to address and mobilize around current social justice issues. So we've done a project around Guantanamo and illegal torture and detention. We did one around mass incarceration, but what we're talking about today is focusing on the Climates of Inequality project. And this is the number of cities that have come together to do this collective action around environmental justice. In each of these communities, there is a university partner, a community organization partner, and some kind of public space that is hosting the final project and public dialogues. And so the work is a collaboration between students, community leaders, and faculty to really dig into the local histories of environmental justice in Newark and all of the other cities that are participating, and really understand through oral histories, through mapping, through other research, what the deep history of environmental racism is and its impact on on climate change, and then share these stories through a variety of different media that appears on the Climates of Inequality website, and in a traveling physical installation. So that is done side by side with other teams of students, faculty, and community partners that are telling their own stories, and then growing these stories collectively by coming together, again, through a traveling exhibit, and on what's putting all these stories together on the Climates of Inequality website. And this exhibit then moves from community to community, engaging people in these stories everywhere that it goes. And it's continuing to travel even past the dates that are here. So in some ways, the basic bedrock of the Humanities Action Lab are these courses that are done through community partnerships, in each university, through which students and residents dig into their local stories and then compile them into a collective exhibition that has public events around it. That's in some ways the way you could describe our work. But really what we're trying to create and celebrate here is a set of relationships through where people are really working together over time through all these elements for a collective action. So we're interested in working with you all in these collaborations that take place locally among students, faculty, and organizers in Newark and these other communities. We organize translocal collaborations between these local teams. And we do this through, the local courses and projects, through lots of virtual workshops that will give you opportunities to participate in, and in-person convenings too in Newark and elsewhere that we'll be talking about. And we're really, trying to come together to dig into our local histories and what they teach us, share those stories across communities and with the larger public in order to build a real collective action and a shared vision and actions for the future. So that's what you'll be hearing about today, are these two specific opportunities for building a kind of translocal campus that includes Newark across this coalition, and sort of breaking down barriers between Newark and its, the campus and the community to create a kind of open community campus. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to our MC. I did just maybe want to invite, I know we're short on time, but Jess Johnson is here as one of the people we have a long relationship with. And maybe you have two sentences to say about what HAL has kind of meant for you, or just what you would say to somebody in Newark coming new to it about what the relationships are.
Yeah, HAL's been a really exciting way. I'll try to do this in 2 sentences. For our history department and public history program to tap into a national network of people trying to do activist public humanities and intellectual work with community partners. And so it's really engaged so many students, and we can track this out and see students who've gone in the project I was involved in into mass incarceration, work to end mass incarceration in their careers and their organizing after this. So it's been this exciting spark and exciting broad network to be involved with.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. 3 sentences, pretty good, says Wendell. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and thanks, Liz, too. So, let me share my screen as well. Okay. Oh, the suspense is always so much. Okay, slideshow. So I'm excited to tell you about that. HAL is having their annual convening, which is going to be on October 26th in Newark. And the convening is this really cool moment where a large portion of our cohort who contributed to the Climates of Inequality exhibit will get together in person to discuss their local stories, to share ideas, and work together to envision tangible outcomes for tackling environmental justice issues. So it's like a really great way for students, like Rutgers students particularly, to actively learn as well as meet and have this collaborative experience with folks from like all over who are doing this work. So obviously we would love for you to come, for you all that are in Newark to come and either bring or encourage your students to come as well. And at the convening, your students will get to, learn how Newark's history and experience is shared by other communities and how it's connected by larger structural forces. They'll get to meet the people behind the stories, build personal relationships with leading scholars and environmental justice leaders from other frontline communities who are working with us at RUN in an ongoing way. And so this isn't like a passive, like listening and absorbing event, although those are awesome too, but this is more active. So this is like, there's going to be workshops happening. So your students will be able to gain leadership and communication skills by teaching others about their experiences too, and giving forth their knowledge of Newark and what's happening in their local communities. So thinking about what sort of like faculty, how you can sort of like put this into your curriculum is like, leading up to the convening, there are sort of like very simple ideas that we have around, getting students engaged, which is like just even as simple as dedicating, one or more course lessons to a theme related to HAL's Climates of Inequality exhibit. And, environmental issues intersect with like every subject that you could think of in school, in university. And because
Kristen, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the slideshow isn't showing up. It just says loading.
I'm sorry. Oh, it says paused. Oh, let me stop and restart. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
You speak so clearly that I don't even need the
Would one of you share? Leora, could you share it? Because for some reason it keeps saying it's paused. I don't know if it's my.
I can do it. Yeah.
I was on slide 3.
Okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Great. So this is the first slide, second slide, third slide.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah. So, but yeah, as I was saying, like environmental issues intersect with any subject, so because the stories on HAL's website are so wide ranging, and transglobal, it provides like so many inroads for students into this topic, regardless of the class, like your class's main subject, right? So, you can also take this as an opportunity to establish relationships before the convening between students and partner locations for those local story partners that are going to be at the convening. So like these could be like one-on-one pen pal style, like correspondence via email, or these could be class meetings over Zoom, whatever the case may be. We can facilitate that for your class. You can go forward, Leora. And then during the convening, there's opportunities to be had as well. So like, obviously you should encourage your students to attend the convening for class credit, with like maybe either extra credit or super class credit, regular class credit. With maybe like a related assignment, like a reaction essay or something like along those lines. You can have them prepared like 3 to 5 questions in advance of the convening, and then bring those questions to the convening and conduct short interviews with convening participants on environmental justice topics. And of course, not every student can attend. Like obviously a lot of Rutgers students have multiple jobs and things like that. So for those that can't, they could also write an essay or do a creative project based on a local story on the COI website. So because there's that virtual element, nobody's left out. Next slide. And then opportunities around / beyond the convening, any like COI related student projects can be featured on HAL's COI website, either on the homepage, there's a section called Happening Now, or as part of Newark's local story, there's a carousel of stories on each local story page, so they can be included in that. Our website allows for all kinds of projects to be featured, such as those listed, But just the one caveat being that because it's a public history, public memory project, anything we use should be engaging for users. So like if students write essays, those essays should also have a visual component. And that could mean images taken at the convening, you know, like, or perhaps archival images or a combo of the two, that sort of thing. But like, you know, on our website, we have like story maps that are really cool. We have artwork, we have, you know, even short fiction, you know, oral histories, like all of this kind of media and ways to like engage with this knowledge are on there in really creative ways. You can skip to the next slide. And then for myself, like using myself as an example, I'm going to be teaching history of Newark this fall and integrating climate civic equality into my course. So for this course, like I've taught it a couple of times before, and like I normally want students to understand Newark's history in terms of different historical perspectives and experiences, and have an understanding of obviously like different inflection points in Newark's history, like the Great Migration, the 1967 Newark Rebellion, Newark's LGBTQ history, and so on. And by integrating HAL's climates of inequality, I want them to be able to connect Newark's history to contemporary issues to help us understand how we got here in terms of Newark being like this community of color that is disproportionately impacted by climate change and environmental issues. And that involves the ways in which Newark's investment in the slave economy means that like they, you know, the city's leaders and corporate interests, capitalists funded not only an incredibly violent and cruel system of exploitation, but they also, you know, funded plantation practices that led to soil erosion, or like, you know, looking at the HAL, Greensboro and Princeville local story, my students will be able to learn how in like 1885, Princeville became the first US town incorporated by formerly enslaved people, yet, you know, they are losing this town, they're losing their historical spaces and their homes to environmental issues like hurricane related flooding. So, you know, they're being displaced again. So students like then can look at like urban renewal in Newark and redlining, and then compare that to COI Milwaukee through their local story, and how federal policies affect where people can and cannot live, and how environmental racism leads to harmful factories and toxic hazardous waste sites being situated next to communities of color rather than, you know, like more predominantly white suburbs. And again, we have questions of, for my class, we're going to be dealing with questions of displacement and lack of spaces in terms of Newark's LGBTQ history, you know, with the death of young butch lesbian Sakia Gunn in a hate crime, and looking also at clubs and ballroom community and chosen families. And, you know, so what is like sanctuary for queer and trans people? And when we look at statistics around homelessness, nearly half of the homeless population is LGBTQ+. And so this means they are directly impacted by climate change and extreme weather and temperatures. And so how is the community responding to that? And so by understanding the historical legacy of these issues, you know, and how power operates and the ways in which community pushes back on different issues throughout time, including environmental racism, you know, me and my class can hopefully imagine solutions together and be able to make what's happening legible to others. Next.
Sorry.
That's okay. So, you know, breaking this down every week, my class will be reading about Newark's history while engaging with various local stories on the COI website to make connections between the local and the global through their like response essay assignments and in-class activities. Their midterm is going to have them engage in a shared dialogue with COI partners. So like taking that idea that I said before, like that one-to-one, you know, communication. They're going to be able to do this over email or in person at the convening if they can attend, which will then feed into an analytical essay. And this will, you know, will require a proposal that they submit in advance telling me who they want to interview so I can like make those connections and what questions they plan to ask. So I can, you know, make sure that their questions are appropriate and substantive and relevant to the issues. And then the HAL partner will like have the opportunity to ask my students questions back about Newark. So that's going to enable my students to share their expertise as well. And then for their final projects, which can also certainly draw on these conversations that they've had during the midterms, are going to be short public history videos for YouTube that take an aspect of the history we have learned, make an argument with supporting evidence about that piece of history and its connection to environmental racism, and provide the audience an understanding of why this like all matters now. So yeah, so that's what I'm going to be doing, and I'm very excited about it. And I want to pass this over now to Leora so that she can talk to you about pedagogy and HAL's like upcoming free school, which is all really cool also.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you for being the primary organizer of this gathering. It's great to see you in action. You're really good at it, and your class sounds so cool. I haven't actually ever gotten to attend some. I know our classes. I think I can drop by your class because
I would love that.
one of it that happens after my class. Hi again. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of a related but somewhat different aspect of work that we're doing. So climates of inequality as like an exhibit and sort of as like a historical project is one aspect of HAL's work, as was mentioned at the beginning, but HAL also sort of is itself the relationships and networks that exist, you know, between all these organizers and students and faculty and community members all over the place. And you know, we've done a lot of work of decentering this network and really bringing in a lot of voices. So like, while we are the HAL Hub based in Newark, we are like have folks from Newark and from all across the world who are participating in the ideas that are driving us. And as you know, a public history organization and as an educational organization, we really tried to develop, and I've been, you know, very lucky to be a part of kind of a pedagogical set of approaches that are, you know, a prefigurative politic, right? That like the things, the worlds that we're talking about are challenging and building new and in different ways, that we're trying to actually enact and practice that in the ways that we do that and bring that into the classroom, right? And offer students an experience that is empowering, not in a sort of like weird corporate school sort of sense, but like genuinely an opportunity to have power in their classrooms. And so, you know, I'm going to talk kind of about some of these tools that we approach learning through, and then I'm going to talk about something that we're calling a free school, which may be different than other ideas of what that means, you know, overlapping and related to other ideas of what free schools mean in Newark or in other places or whatever. So a lot of these tools are things that like I have utilized in the classroom, that I've drawn on from collaborations with other folks. Some of you may know Jack Chen, who's based at the university, is a mentor of mine, and we worked together for many years. They come from lots of different traditions, and you know, a lot of them are different practices, and some of these maybe ones, or all of them maybe ones that you've done things with or utilized before, but this is really like kind of the grounding ideas that we've been operating in as it comes to learning. And I'll go through them, like there's little sentences here, just like, so you know, it's broken down, but they're kind of like all overlapping and intermingled. It's not really like one is separated from the other. But I think a really important one is like, you know, we ground our students in like a positionality, you know, that they exist in a world of systems of power, right? And so that doesn't mean just intersectionality of here are my like political identities, but like there's so many things that make us up as people, right? Like I'm trans, sure, and I'm a woman, sure, and I'm Jewish, sure, but I'm also, you know, a photographer, and I also, you know, have childhood trauma, and I also am sober, and I'm also, you know, whatever happened today to me, right? And these are all things that shape the kind of person that I am. And I think, you know, a lot of students that I've worked with at this university, at other universities, feel very like boxed in, or feel like they don't have a sense of self, or they don't know where, you know, or they fit into one box and that's who they are. And so sort of self-reflexivity offers a way for them to think of themselves as like engaged in political systems, but also as sort of like a unique set of different things that allow them to be connected to others around them, and also allows them to challenge his core beliefs about themselves and others, right? Like, you know, I just have a lot of students who think something really tough about themselves that they don't need to be stuck to. And how do we support them in the classroom of growing through and around that and understanding that? It doesn't mean abandoning a core belief necessarily, but how do they challenge that or find that they can be multiple things at once? Another aspect that I think is really important in that empowerment idea, like actual empowerment, is trying to bring non-hierarchical learning into the classroom, right? Like the classic one is I am the teacher and they are the students, right? That like is just, okay, duh, that's how classrooms operate. And what does it look like when we begin to challenge that? What does it look like when I begin to turn over actual power in the classroom as to what the classroom looks like, how it's shaped my sense of like who I am, right? In my understanding of my core beliefs about myself, how do I give some of that up to my students and find healthy ways for them to be able to take on that power? Because I often find too, you're like, okay, you've got autonomy, and a young person may never have had experience having that level of power or control in a space in their life, right? These are 18, 19-year-olds. It's the first time they've ever been in an environment where they've had an opportunity to actually have agency over what they do, what their life looks like in this space. And they have so many different areas of their life where they're being told who they are, what they do, family pressures, responsibilities, jobs, careers, teachers who make them feel small, right? And so how do we open up new opportunities for students to like really understand and feel like they actually have a space, right? If I create a fishbowl in the classroom where they have a level of power that they may not have in other parts of their lives, and how does that offer a perspective on the world, on themselves, on their self-reflexivity, about how they're positioned in the world and how they can challenge that? And that sort of gets us into the idea of critical pedagogy, which I'm sure many of you have heard before, but how are they connected to systemic oppression and collective liberation? I think is a core question when we're talking about all the things that Kristen just laid out about all these histories and all these things, right? Like, it's like, that's all great information, but if we see it as distance from ourselves, or we see it as unrelated to ourselves, we see it, oh, well, that's gay history, so that's not me, I'm straight, or that's Black history, that doesn't have any connection to me, right? And I think, a critical pedagogy, or just a pedagogy that is sort of engaged with them in relationship to these systems, beneficiaries, harmed by them, a mix, it's always going to be this, again, this intersecting set of identities and positionalities in relationship to these systems, right? It just, the work that HAL is doing, where we have a network of folks that are drawn from, they're not just, oh, I'm a student and I'm going to work with the community, right? Like, often our students are minority serving institutions, or they're like commuter schools, or, like Rutgers Newark, right? Like, they come from the impact communities. I have students from the Ironbound who are like dealing with, horrible intersecting environmental racism issues for their whole life, right? Like, they're not separate. So the idea that we would suggest that they are separate, or they should learn about these things separately, makes no sense. So how do we actually grow on that? And then I have students who like grew up in the suburbs who feel like they haven't had a care in their life, and like not in a, that's great, but like, how then do they see this as any way related to them? And I once did a workshop with Neil Maher at NJIT, who had a student do a project on the highway that they drove on every day from the suburb where they lived, and never understood that there were people who were impacted or lived beneath that highway and around that highway that suffered from it. And that was like eye-opening to them to understand that they got to benefit from a system that caused harm to fellow people in the university, right? So these are the kinds of relationships. And to go on, to build on that, then this idea of mutual mentorship, right? How do we have students who see themselves as able to learn from each other? And that there is not just, again, if we're going to have non-hierarchical learning, if we're going to see everybody in the class as having knowledge to share, how do we then web that, right? How do we have a nodal web rather than a hierarchy? How do we learn across these relationships? And how do we help students see themselves as like comrades, supporters, advocates for people to challenge their classmates in direct ways? And so building these kind of systems in the classroom to support mutually supportive learning relationships, right? And that's between students, that's between me and the students, that's between, me and collaborators who come into the class, that's between the students and the collaborators, right? There's so many directions where we think of mutual mentorship, right? That in every learning experience, both people or everybody involved in that learning experience is something to teach everybody else, right? Radical stuff when you bring it into a traditional classroom, but just like life stuff when you think about any other part of your life, right? Your friends, right? You think of them as people that you learn from, you mutually support. So how do we bring this in? And the final thing that I'll talk about before the free school is really a beautiful concept that came out of the network called mutual aid storytelling. And mutual aid storytelling is really like the idea that building connection to support each other in community is done through sharing stories about ourselves, that we learn what our shared needs are by talking about our lives. And a story can be what we think of as an elaborate 3-part arc hero's journey. And it can also be, I'm hungry. That's a story that somebody's telling about themselves. I have students at Rutgers Newark who come to the class and are hungry, and like they're fidgeting, or they're like weird, or they're like, hey, oh, I'm so sorry, miss, can I go out? I haven't eaten today, and I have to, be really aware of like, okay, like students are coming here, or I have students come in horribly sick, but feel they have to be there because they've been told a story that they have to be in class no matter what, or they're going to fail, right? So there's stories that my students are telling me all the time, just through their actions, much less by talking out loud. So how do we use these shared stories to actually understand, build relationships, and then develop projects, right? Connect with the course materials, right? This is the way that we actually like build more deeply engaged learning relationships with each other, is through these tools. Like everything I've just laid out are different ways to actually get students to care, so that, I don't want to be the one standing at the front of the classroom, like lecturing at a bunch of really bored looking, half asleep students. Like it just sucks. And it's not like what I'm interested in. And I'm also like, I'm interested in there for students to get what they want out of a class rather than what I want to give them. And these are the kind of tools that we've been using to do that. So this is kind of like this set of principles and practices and values that we've begun really experimenting with in different ways, to some success, to some failure. Like we're doing the best we can, and then we're beginning to expand to other parts of the network, and that we draw on from the network around how we're learning. And these are the things that we at HAL can offer you. But to jump forward, one of the ways that we're trying to develop this in line with our larger sort of mission around like community, like this is not, Humanities Action Lab is not just a tool for faculty and students. It is a community-based tool, and in our own value document, our own value statement, we center the communities. The communities that we work in come first. So when we think about the fact that we have a lot of resources at the university and in the work that we do, how do we actually not just like invite people into that, but go out, understand, build relationships, learn what people want and what they're asking for, and how we as an organization, and which has specific goals ourselves, right? We can't do everything. We're not a mutual aid organization, right? We're a public history organization. But how can we, from that position, and knowing the resources that we have available through the university with the connections that we've also built on that side, how can we provide and create this sort of network of different connections that actually integrate us fully into the community of Newark in real material ways that are mutually supportive, right? And that, again, you've seen mutual about 50 million times. I've probably said it, because the work that we're doing is not like, how do we get something? And so when we're talking to you all as teachers, as parts of the university, it's not how we can provide something for you to just get something. It's like, how do we help support us all and the relationships you already likely have to be integrated into this, and to be like ways that we can be mutually beneficial to everybody involved, right? That everybody is getting some level of benefit, of growth, of knowledge, of resources, of whatever that is. So one of the ways that we've done that is developing this idea of a free school, which we're sort of thinking of not just as it is literally free, right? Not just as it is free, not just as in the sort of American civil rights-based idea of freedom school, which is also great, which is focused on sort of teaching radical, like leftist theory, ideas and histories, right? But actually something that is more about the actual structure of how the school is created, right? So the pedagogy, again, comes back into it. So it is free. It is meant to be focused on like making connections that are like progressive, supportive, like, radical in these ways, but also that the structure of it in itself is meant to offer a new sort of experience to people. So it's free, accessible, and collaborative. Learning and organizing space for local organizers, Newark residents, and Rutgers Newark students and educators to build mutual support and solidarity, right? So we're trying to bring everyone into this space and have it be a collaboration. So it's not something that HAL is saying, this is what it looks like. It's something that we are in the process of developing in collaboration with folks. It's something that will be non-hierarchical and consensus-based, approach to learning that supports autonomy and holistic well-being of participants, right? So this isn't just that we are going to teach you a workshop on how to do this. It's we are going to teach each other how to do things. And I think that's kind of one of the cool things. And also it's going to be a space where we have to do it with consensus, which means that people have a chance and agency to shape it based on their ideas, right? And that people are getting that sense that my students get when I ask them and create the space for them to feel like they have a really active role in what we're doing, that they get to make choices. That sense of building autonomy in oneself, being a part of this is a chance to get to feel empowered, in a real way. It's meant, as I said, to be an open exchange of knowledge and resources between Newark community members and Rutgers Newark, right? That mutual aid support kind of model. And that we want it to be sustainable, right? We want it to be something that permanently embeds in the university and the community. that it actually is not just like, okay, this is a 1 semester project, or this is my student's project, or this is just, on a grant, right? Like, we want to build the foundations that this can land somewhere and develop organically, but have its own sustainability to it, that it can be a larger commitment to this kind of relationship between all those people involved, between Newark residents and community organizers and faculty and students and the administration, all these things, right? And like the final thing that I will share is like, we're going to do a workshop. So as you think about like the fall and how you might want to or consider integrating yourself or collaborating with us on this, we're going to do a workshop in the fall on like how one could integrate a course into the free school, right? And that doesn't mean that you're opening up the entire course every session to invite people into it, but that maybe sessions or workshops or different aspects, or there could be moments where students and community members come together to learn together about something connected to your course, right? It's a chance to actually explore that and what that means, because what it means is going to be different for everybody involved, right? So I can't give you a like, here's what you do and here's how you plug the free school into your class, because we're trying to do something a bit more complicated, but I think rewarding in terms of like the depth of collaboration. So this will be a workshop that brings together Rutgers faculty and students with local organizers and Newark residents. So like, we'll collectively imagine together what could be future sessions. And yeah, this is a chance. I know many people who teach at the university really want to collaborate with folks in the community, in the community around, but like, that's really a lot of work and it's really hard and it's like a pain in the ass. And we can speak to that because it's been a pain in the ass for us too, to like build relationships. It's long-term and it's hard, and like, people are people, and you put in work and then people flake and whatever. And so this is a chance to like have support in doing that, and that we have a lot of experience and have wonderful relationships with folks at various organizations and communities in our city, right? And so like, this is a opportunity to be a part of like building on those relationships and then bringing in your own relationships with people that you work with. So I've been talking for a while. I think that I'm good, unless I missed anything from, if Kristen or Liz has anything else.
No, I think that was great. Thank you, Leora, and thank you, Liz, for presenting before too. Before, we want to definitely give some time for you all to ask us questions. I just want to take a minute to, I'm also going to be adding a link to that survey that I had mentioned prior. I'm going to put it in the chat, and it's just regarding, your interest in incorporating HAL into your courses, because we really want to create like a cohort of HAL educators who are able to like participate in the October 6th convening, in terms of bringing students and integrating assignments, and also be a part of shaping the free school, as Leora just mentioned, and that would be like an early October workshop led by Leora. And if this is something you're interested in, so, you can let us know through the survey. And I just also want to offer that I would be happy to do a workshop or like even just like a brainstorming meeting in September, if that's useful to anyone, regarding integrating HAL into your course. But even if that's not useful, or you don't have time, or whatever the case may be, regardless, I'll share a common document listing everyone's curriculum ideas as a shared resource that we can all have. So with that being said, the link is in the chat, and feel free to jump in with any questions or comments, or feedback or anything. Erin with the hand up.
Yeah, thanks everyone for all that. My question is regarding the free school, how logistically you envision that like manifesting, like there being classes, certain days, certain times, who would attend them, how they would know about them, like what it would look like concretely.
Yeah, so we're still like organizing a lot of that. We have like a planning collective, and they're beginning to figure stuff out. But one of the things I'll say is that it will likely in the early days like shift around the different kinds of schedules and things that are involved. I think ideally, like doing workshops at times when makes sense for the folks that are engaged or whatever, right? So like I've got a class this semester that's 2:30 to 5:20 on Thursdays. We'll likely have some workshops that align with that, so the students can be there and involved. The people who will be joining and coming into it will be coming through like this range of, like, we have this planning collective. They're going to be the main people, like doing a lot of outreach in addition to the sort of existing groups and organizations that are in our network. But that includes folks who are part of Newark Water Coalition, Brick City Mutual Aid, Mutual Morris, and some other folks that I'm blanking on now. So the answer is that it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all model, and it'll be really adaptive to the needs of the people involved, including you as a faculty member and stuff like that. So part of what we'll be figuring out as people express interest in stuff is like, we will obviously be planning ahead because people need to like figure out how to fit things in their schedules and stuff like that. But we'll be taking the time to like do that work together, to like collaborate on how exactly that will unfold, rather than the free school is every Thursday at 9 p.m. or whatever. Maybe someday it will be, but that's definitely not where we're going to start, because I think we want to try to like maximize the resources and people involved, and like potentially there will be work, one workshop that certain people want and can attend at this time and others than this, it's like, we're going to do the best. It's not going to be, I think, at least starting off, something where it's like a normal traditional class where like it meets 10 weeks, 3 hours or whatever. Like it may be more contained workshops as it starts, and then that will probably build connection and like ideas of how it will develop in the future. Does that answer your question?
And I'll just add, because I know a lot of people have asked this, and if this is that at the moment, and Leora, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not trying to create something where non-matriculated students get course credit. So that's not, we're more trying to work within existing courses that Rutgers students are already in, and kind of open those spaces to be, half Rutgers students and half other Newark residents who may not be matriculated to learn together. But that there are like we're not trying to sort of like do a long battle with the university to try to create something that would grant anybody like some specific course credit, because our experience is that like that's not really a thing that's the most desired thing anyway. So the current, for this semester anyway, the structure is that Leora has a class that's a regular class, gen ed on the books, that undergraduates attend, and that it's finding creative ways of opening certain classes, certain days to other people to participate in like a collaborative learning. And so like what the incentives,
sort of, though, I think, just to be clear, it's not, it's like kind of in the middle of what you just said. It's not providing course credit for folks who aren't at the university, and it's not just inviting people into existing classes. It's like creating a sort of third space where people are like collaboratively doing something different that they wouldn't do in either of those ways, right? So it's like an opportunity to learn together in a way that's beneficial for everybody involved around things that wouldn't necessarily traditionally be in that class in that way, and wouldn't be something that somebody who is a resident would have access to otherwise. So I think that's kind of.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Wendell Marsh had a question as well.
Yeah, so thank you all for this presentation. I'm really excited about everything you all are doing. HAL has kind of been on my radar for a while now, and I've been wanting to learn more, and especially hearing the kind of principles of the group are definitely of interest to me. In the past probably 2 years, I've been trying to kind of practice kind of similar ideas in my own teaching, but it's been kind of frustrating because I've been doing so in isolation, and it doesn't actually work when you're doing that by yourself. So I'm really happy to kind of hear more that there's the space where this is happening. And my question is kind of out of curiosity about how you all have kind of come to some of these principles, and kind of articulating them as an organization. I'll just kind of share that I work with a kind of a third space group at a university related to the University Gaston Berger in Saint Louis, Senegal. And the reason why I kind of found HAL was because I was looking for models for what we were trying to do, and it seems like there's a lot of overlap here. But this just idea of kind of local histories, but like kind of global questions to get at them is something that we're really interested in with those folks. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of curious about the kind of formation of the organization, and just by what processes have you all kind of articulated where you are now?
Liz,
Maybe I can do the early, and then Leora can do the middle and the late, and Kristen has been here like all along the way. So the Humanities Action Lab in some ways emerged from, I'm just going to put another link in the chat, and another coalition that I launched, and I bring this particular one up because of the connection to Senegal, and so that's something to explore separately. But so this was a sort of an international coalition that believed in the like connections between local memory and global movement organizing. Mostly they were all local projects, but one project that sort of was developed by this group was called the Guantanamo Public Memory Project, that I can also, and that one was sort of developed by the group with a different model of working with American universities and experimenting with having students do their own research about the history of this place that was whose history was very little known, and collaborating with people who had lived, worked, been held there or served there, and to sort of raise a greater public awareness of the long history of detention and illegal practices in this place. And so that was a project that was very much like motivated by that topic. But in the process, this small group, and it was about 9 universities, kind of saw the potential of this kind of participatory public memory process, and just what kind of transformative impact it was having on the students, the kind of greater public awareness and dialogue that can be generated by linking histories together. It was a similar structure of a like, modular traveling exhibit created by all these different communities that traveled to all of their places. So that led that small group of 9 universities, which ranged from Columbia and Brown to state schools like UMass, and sort of it was a range of political kind of contexts as well as size of institutions, but they all had kind of primarily students who were learning about the issues but were not directly impacted by them. But the group saw the potential of this and decided to form, rather than just doing one project, to form a kind of ongoing collective to think about how we could sort of combine our efforts to, in a similar way, address other pressing issues that had not sort of been historicized, or where the public dialogue about its history was not very present. And that led to the formation. We decided to form the Humanities Action Lab. And by we, I mean primarily the university. It was like a group of university representatives, mostly faculty. And that led to the first HAL project, was called States of Incarceration, that Jess Johnson, who was here, was part of, that sort of invited these communities to dig into the long histories, the kind of roots of mass incarceration in each of their localities, and its consequences and movements today. So that project really showed both the strength of the potential of this kind of participatory public memory process, but also the weakness and the problems of the sort of structure and power relationships that made it up, because it was very driven by faculty at universities. It was very dominated by universities where the students, it was sort of only like 30% of the students overall shared that they felt directly impacted by mass incarceration. So it was very much a kind of like student community divide in that relationship. And that led us to really redefine both who the we should be and how this we should work together. And that's what we've been sort of working through in Climates of Inequality, that really focused on a different structure of relationships between faculty, students, and community partners, giving much more visibility and agency to the community partners. And then in its later second sort of iteration, investing solely in minority serving institutions where students were sort of living, had grown up in frontline communities. So the work on sort of structure and resources, sort of developed there, but what Leora and others really have led is a deep rethinking of like how we work together and what our accountability is. And so I'll let Leora talk a little bit about her leadership of that, and then that's sort of how it brought us to where we are now.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left, so I'll just keep it really short and just say that I think a major shift that we had when the pandemic hit and the uprising happened, obviously a lot of people are thinking about these kind of questions, but also just seeing that a network that has always been all over the place could use like these tools like Zoom and stuff like that to actually connect and plan a lot more, as opposed to like just having to gather all the time. And so through that, we started like doing kind of rounds. We had this thing called the Translocal Learning Studio, which was just like, we did like different workshops and conversations and like developed like that, okay, like if we want to be accountable to each other, like what does that actually mean? And what does that look like? And how do we, develop that as a real thing? And how do we move away from the idea of accountability or transformative justice as like something that happens when something bad happens, as opposed to like a set of practices for how we move and operate together. And then we began just developing different ideas like mutual aid storytelling, and like we really began to do more and have deeper relationships with like our frontline community organizer partners. Like their voices became much more clear, and we had more opportunities, and they were doing really active, amazing work, especially because of the things that were going on at that time. And I think because of that, we were able, because we were one of the spaces that like they were involved in, that we're having these kinds of conversations, that like we really got to benefit from that, because like people were doing really intense work, but like having to do so much work. And I say this as somebody who was doing mutual aid and organizing and abolition work in New York, like at the time, like you're moving at such a pace that like you're not able to actually stop and think about this stuff. So to have a place where people were able to like talk about what they were going through, how they would like it to be, what they like, what isn't working, whatever, and imagine like those kind of things, really we grew a lot in and developed a range of like groups and that have an active role. And like we've been doing more as we planning an in-person convening, as you heard about, that we want you to come to. And this is the first time we've done that with a planning collective. Like there's like a group of people who are doing that as opposed to HAL Hub, like sort of being the main facilitators of that, right? So it's like little things. And I think not trying to hold ourselves to the standard of like, how do we get to the most like radical version of this organization right now? But like, how do we have a set of values that we collaboratively develop over time? And then how do we enact those values? And how do we always make sure we're checking back in on those values? And how do we see when we're failing? And like, you know, I think part of it has been letting go of an ideal utopian version of this organization. And part of it has been letting go of a we can't do anything because it's like so scary to try to change, you know, organization. And I think being in there is allowing us to see it. And the last thing I'll just say is like, we're in this moment where we're trying to bring all these values, like, right, it's like one thing to create a values document that you spend a year on and accountability process and all these things that you spend a year on. It's another thing to like take that from the group of 25, 30 people who are involved in organizing that as a collective and expand it to a network of people who like have no idea that we've been doing this and don't necessarily care, right? And like they're like teaching their class, they're like, I just want to plug into the exhibit. And it's like, well, what do you do with that, right? You can't make everyone care about what you care about. And like, at what point does somebody get so far enough away that you're like, well, you're not really a part of HAL anymore in the way that HAL is now? And what way do you like take the time to really try to like make it clear why it is worth integrating into this new way of doing things? So those are the questions that we have that are ongoing. And I think they're really, really interesting questions. And, you know, like nonprofit industrial complex, the university industrial complex, like these are like big systems that like I'm both a part of and that I hate and that I organize against outside of it in different ways, you know? So like to be in it and to be trying to like work with people who actually care about trying to get to somewhere different is like really an interesting place to be in. And I really love it. You know, I really think that there's like a lot of actually like cool stuff to be done, and that like all hope is not lost in trying to create different models in these systems, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you all for coming. Thank you for listening. And I hope you'll fill out the survey that's in the chat. If you have further questions, you could always reach out to any one of us and we'll be happy to talk more with you. But yeah, thank you. I hope you all have a great day. Yeah, take care.
Thank you guys so much for coming and for the great questions. It's really been lovely and we'd love to have you involved in this work. So definitely reach out.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you do. I'd love to hear more about your work too.
Yeah.
Great. Have a good one. Thanks again, Chris.
That was awesome. Oh my gosh.